Hi, this is a standalone piece I'd like to share, which is not a lecture, but an expression of opinion similar to what you might hear at the Patrick Henry Supper Club in Richmond, near the church where Patrick Henry gave his speech, where people gather to discuss individual liberties. I want to share a couple of my personal experiences and get you, the viewer, to post experiences of your own where you feel that you have less say in your own affairs than people had a generation ago. We are living in strange times. News sources, which were once very strict, have become a vehicle for daily internet sensations where reporters give their personal opinions on the air. And in relatively minor events, a man flies his little gyrocopter onto the White House lawn, a former general has an affair, the scandal becomes the story. We might as well be shown just 3 rotating headlines every day. Big name reacts to insignificant event. Unsuspected citizen commits barbarous act. Let's see here. Brutalized child's parent revealed to be hairless ape. Police cite reason for barbarous act was that parent was bigger than child. Child brutalized in home previously believed to be safe. Police cite walls as reason for mystery. Child has been entrusted to another unsuspected citizen for safekeeping. Here's, despite innocence and insignificance, offender broke obscure rule. Instead of informing us, the goal of all this is to garner judgment, like a soap opera. It's hard to know what the story is sometimes, except that a brand has been defiled. And if this is the goal, there is probably a rule or a law that can be found in any situation to discredit someone, just as there's a demeaning text for every story, until elected officials are removed as soon as they take office, and someone is pouring through social media looking for any prosecutable offense that can be tied to someone. This puts our future in the hands of the bean counters, people whose only motive is to complete the paperwork in front of them, power which doesn't help them express themselves or improve their situation in any way. College fraternities are widely known for doing objectionable things, but cracking down on these has made every fraternity subject to the Dean Wormers of the world. When laws are passed, they've become so long, lawmakers themselves don't understand them. Just people who are paid to sit and write behind closed doors like monks. Let's call this kind of government a mediocrity. Government by those who don't know or care that they are governing. At the same time, the competition for the leadership of this nation begins again, where this time around there has been a clear frontrunner for the past 3 years. So for the 3rd time in a row, you might recall there were 20 Republican debates the last time around. The future of the country is being argued by individuals, every one of which is promoting the platform, here's what I would do instead, all but one of whom are losers. While there are changes to our way of life which are never on the ballot and are never reported. And to fight this demoralization, people who are very smart are giving us moral and spiritual advice in our relationships, careers, and so forth, which may be completely true or biblical, like selfishness is wrong, care more about others than yourself, but encourage us to live like ants without knowing the downside of this behavior. So here's a headline I'd like to give based on my own sources. The individual has less influence than ever before. I'd like to share a couple of things from my personal experience, which is something I don't normally do. These aren't immutable facts for debate, they're just my testimonial. My wife and I live in a neighborhood where the HOA, Housing Authority, takes good care of us, but in exchange for this service imposes certain limits on our personal liberties. No matter how long a couple has been living together, their marriage may not be legal because it would disqualify them from living here. As a result of this, there are many single-parent households which can't change because if somebody else starts spending the night, it breaks the rules. There is no privacy here. Housing inspections require things to be a certain way, which includes no public displays of affection. There are no yard or pet privileges, so someone who grew up in this neighborhood never had a hamster. Security cameras watch us to make sure we never feed a stray cat. The housing manager scolds us like children. There are people whose living conditions aren't as nice as ours who don't have these restrictions. When I was a bachelor, I was one of them. This isn't meant to be a complaint, but evidence that people's freedom can go down as they advance toward raising a family. If you're in a situation where you're not allowed to increase your income or have nice things, then there's no amount of money that can change this. If you tried to trace these decisions back to any individual, there's no one there. The second experience I'd like to share is in the workplace. I have two jobs, both of which I enjoy, one of which is in my field of environmental science. I have watched public awareness and interest in conservation decline over the course of my career. And although I have the knowledge and the volition to change this, the majority of jobs and facilities are supported by groundskeeping, which is environmentally destructive. Basically, I have to pull weeds, every one of which I know the name of, because it's the only thing we can do that is valued. This happens on a much larger scale as trees that are deemed too large are being removed from all public facilities and businesses. My second job is in an office environment where I'm very good friends with everyone, including the boss, but my hours are cut whenever there's an opportunity to do so. So getting the job done faster works against me. I often find that work intended for me was done by someone else to cut corners, so the work is not as good. And toward the end of the season, the tenor of friendly conversation changes because they know my days are numbered. Now, my personal experiences aren't the last word on the subject. I don't know what forces are at work behind them, but here is some idea of why this happens. In the fight to raise the minimum wage, which has been at a standstill for many years, Thousands of people turn out regularly to protest in cities like Raleigh, North Carolina, obviously because it affects their livelihood. Very recently at one of these, there was an older woman protesting very vocally against raising the minimum wage. And I don't have the exact quote, but it was something like this: "If you work, you eat. Nobody's going to give you a handout. You just need to work harder." A judgment-based statement, like judgment-based voting, where you're deciding an issue that doesn't directly affect you. And of course, the news team aired what she had to say, just as a woman smacking her son around stole the show at the Chicago riots. My question is, how does she know things still work the way they did in the past? If it were to change, who would notice but the employees themselves? Individuals all over the world are paying a price for decision makers that don't know there's a war against them because it goes completely unsaid. There are no rules or establishment of what you're talking about, only losers. Now, you can say that employers and housing authorities have their reasons, but to those who would dispute that there's a war on the individual, I would ask this question: do the people whose decisions affect your life know you exist? It's a very simple subject, but people don't speak strictly about it. For example, the biggest case of individualism in the world today, its greatest hero is Eric Snowden. Saying this is a victory for individualism is not an endorsement or a criticism, which is all people want to talk about. I heard someone say he threw his job away, as if defying the United States government and getting away with it was foolish because he lost his menial position. So we don't address the causes of why individualism has declined. Overpopulation is one. There are fewer pioneers in each field. In previous centuries, if you had just a basic interest in dinosaurs or astronomy, you could be considered a founder today. In a previous video, I tried to answer the question, why are young people told that whether they live to be 70 or 80 makes them healthy or unhealthy now? Why are those years golden? And it occurred to me, the reason it takes people so long now to do the things they want to do, teens are now tweens, someone who lives with their parents up to age 26 is an adult child, people are raising their own grandkids, started with all those school teachers and parents who get to reduce the liberties of people who are younger than they are. You'll understand someday. But it doesn't stop there. And the reason is exactly what you thought it was at the time. They don't want people to have it. There is a minister and motivational speaker named T.D. Jakes, who is a very smart and spiritual man and has inspired thousands of people to lead better lives. He has what he calls 5 steps to happiness. Here are the first 3. Own your own happiness. Your spouse and your children aren't going to make you happy. A big house isn't going to make you happy. Choose to be happy with what you have. Good idea. challenge your own story. People torment themselves by how they see their life. They've told themselves a story as if it were the truth, when it is really a perspective truth. And sometimes you've narrated a story that you beat yourself to death with. Challenge your own story. Change the way you talk to yourself about who you are and what happened to you and what you're going to do in your life. Enjoy the journey, not the destination. A lot of us delay our happiness and say, when I get to this level, I'm going to be happy. Enjoy the journey. Enjoy the whole process. All of these things are true. They may even apply to me. And he says other things like, don't let your situation change who you are, nothing that you've been through will be wasted, and so forth. But the 3 points that I read can be misconstrued to get the better of people. Have you ever noticed a lot of fiction, especially crime fiction, villainizes people who have been wronged or whom society has dealt a bad hand? In a murder mystery, the victim is usually a bad person who gets away with things, while the killer is someone who is otherwise upstanding and driven by morals, hence the mystery. Their crime was that they broke the rules instead of just being content with their misfortune in a situation where society has already chosen the winners and losers. This is opposed to fiction where society bends around the protagonist, or society itself is the villain. Stefan Molyneux, whom I subscribe to, is a very smart man who takes radio callers and responds to them live on his channel, which is something I can't do. But I've noticed in several of his videos, usually in the first minute or so, he dismisses a major sticking point so he can get around it. In his video, Is Education a Human Right?, he begins by saying, rights do not exist. You don't have a right to anything in this world. And then he moves on to the subject of education. I know he has reasons for saying this. Legal rights are just paper because laws are just paper. But those don't exist just so you can gloss over something when the Founding Fathers had very good arguments for human rights. You can disagree without saying things like, well, there is no argument, just so you don't have to get into it, because that's not a good enough reason. There is something missing from all these discussions about individualism, rights, and entitlement, where one side is completely against those things, and the other side tries to make it sound economically feasible to ask for more instead of giving their true argument. Here are those missing arguments. You can't oppose individualism because it would be self-defeating. Even if you're promoting selflessness and communalism, you're the only person who knows what those ideas are. By speaking against the Bill of Rights, you're exercising your own right to free speech. You'd have to silence yourself to take it away. So it's detrimental to any argument. Everyone believes they're entitled to something. Even the staunchest critics who came up with the word entitlement to describe people who are different from them still believe in deservedness. give credit where it's due. Hard work is its own reward. They still think they're entitled to a paycheck at the end of the day. Nobody thinks they deserve nothing, or they'd be slaves lying naked in the gutter somewhere. People whose ideology is based on their success story are often the most vulnerable when that success is taken from them by some arbitrary circumstance, because their trust is greater. They could say, "I'll start over if I have to," thinking their chance to do that can't be infringed as well. Every philosophy is dependent on something that can be shaken. Everyone has basic needs which are as sacred to us as any considerations of business, but have no place in the debate over employment, foreclosures, minimum wage, etc. You have to provide for your family, feed them, and have a roof over your head. You have to. Even if you had to steal or borrow money you know you will never pay back, you'd still have to. It's a necessity. There's no alternative. So where does this fit into the equation of lending, where you have a fiscal responsibility to pay off your debts? It doesn't, because an individual's needs are known only to him. How can they be supplied or even addressed if no one else knows how serious they are? So economists and business owners have been saying for years they can't afford to raise the minimum wage or they'd have to lay off workers. But if business needs are a certainty, aren't individual needs also a certainty? In the debate over minimum wage, you always hear arguments like, higher wages would allow people to be more productive citizens and put something back into the economy, to justify their real needs as if public necessities are a better reason. The reason a minimum wage exists is the high cost of living. That is its purpose. So if businesses can make these standalone statements, why say things like, if only there was more work available, when what people need is for money to go into their pockets? Strictly speaking, raising wages may not contribute anything to greater society. In the financial debate where everyone is either a have or a have-not, there are no winners. Entire states can't meet their needs because not enough money is printed. So maybe everything you do is a reminder of how little you have. And if you suddenly win the lottery, now you're surrounded by jealousy and thievery. But there is no escape from finance. When was the last time you heard a politician or even a minister say that money corrupts, that you shouldn't let it be your master? When have you heard an economist admit that these are just worthless pieces of paper? Their value is speculative, so why don't we just print ones that meet all our needs? Here is that missing argument. We need to reduce our dependence on economy. Don't invest our souls in it until it defines us. On that note, we need to reduce our dependence on the workplace. Don't give it absolute control over our lives. Put more into your own goals and family. In the anti-academic doctrine, I said that colleges and commercialism in general reward a constant indecisiveness while preventing people who have known what they want all their lives from reaching their destinies. Presumably because individualism is a threat to them. The belief that everything is fine allows people to fall through the cracks, and when people act unilaterally, it affects others in ways they don't know. In any mutual arrangement, employment, civics, housing, etc., no one knows what your considerations are but you. We're told this is the way things are, when from your perspective it may be a very different situation. But we're led to believe if something is self-serving, that makes it not true. For example, any task is decided by the person doing it. Even the guy who stands guard next to the U.S. Constitution is making a conscious decision for his own purposes. If you want to build and improve your situation, you don't need permission from anyone to do that. The justification is that you want it. My wife and I have the attitude, don't be like the world. Make your own reality. And this can be shared by conservatives, anarchists, believers, optimists. So I'd like to coin a phrase that goes along the lines of no taxation without representation. There is no we without me. I would encourage you to post any experiences of your own where your personal liberties have been infringed, perhaps in a way that no one speaks of or wasn't a part of any legitimate decision-making process, or even situations that go against this theory. I am not a sage who is above scrutiny. You can post anything you want. Please keep it respectful of other people's circumstances. I've posted some links below. Thanks for listening.